TikTok is such an interesting microcosm right now because you have someone like Alex who I feel like has kind of innovated and come up with this idea, and then you have just tons of people who are now copying him, who are doing similar things. Like, let me Photoshop a picture of you. Let me, whatever. Do you think that's leading to us to a place where meritocracy is king, or where there's no protection of ideas? What's kind of your thoughts?
Well, I kind of look at it as, again, going back to film, is everybody uses the same three act structure, but people don't say, oh, Steven Spielberg stole that three act structure from his predecessors. It's the same thing here, is understanding what Alex does as a storytelling structure. You can easily make that your own. You can also easily just copy it, completely. Now, I will say there's a lot of people that try and copy Alex and don't have success. There are some that do and have some success. So, yeah, I think that there's definitely a fine line of, you don't want to, again, in the case of a movie, if you make a horror film, is you just completely rip off The Shining and, do your own version of it. You want to kind of put your own spin on it. But I think understanding the structure, and we call that format man on the street. And man on the street is used in many different ways, and each of the ways that we dissect are distinctly unique. So, yes, there's a fine line where you don't want to just be ripping people off, but learning the elements, those qualitative nuances of what makes him successful with that format, I think is extremely helpful to understand how to become a good storyteller, and is not, necessarily, there's a way to do it where you're not just like kind of ripping him off, so to speak.
Yeah. No, I think that's such an interesting and such a great point. That it's, hey, there's always, I mean, if you've seen, like, most people have probably watched everything as a remix. There's so much mixing and remixing going on constantly. And so you look at TikTok and, like, that man on the street concept, there's tons of people who have taken that concept, but then kind of made it their own and then found success there. Like, I think you look at Alex and then you also look at Jimmy Darts. I wouldn't say either of those are copying each other, but it's a very similar format, but they both took their own way and kind of leveraged their personality and what they're best at. And it's a very unique version. They're both finding amazing success in their own way. I think, Mr. Beast has shown that there's a lot of ways to innovate on things that have already been done, to giving away that a lot of that giving, I think, was really kind of, I first kind of saw from David Dobrik, but I think Mr. Beast took that to like another level and really innovated there. So yeah, it's very interesting to kind of see that. Where do you feel like that takes us as you look at all of this data, as you have access to all of this data? What are the things you're kind of gathering, and where do you think that leads us to next?
Well, I think there's going to be more and more saturation of the market as more and more people get on social media, because it's still growing. I think where it leads us is, how effective of a storyteller are you? I mean, that's going to determine whether you rise to the top or fall to the bottom. And it's so fascinating because, we work with a lot of brands and companies, and we still run into a lot of resistance from the fact that people are still operating off this old paradigm. I want to create a niche message for a niche audience. And that just doesn't work as it pertains to organic. And it's becoming even more challenging as it becomes to paid, because targeting is, been hurt significantly with iOS updates and restrictions and privacy restrictions and things like that. And, the people, the brands and the creators that have the most success, and this applies to film too, is how can you make the average person care? Somebody that knows nothing about you or may have no interest in your subject matter. How can you make them interested? Like, um, Mark Rober, an engineer from NASA. He's making engineering interesting with his own spin. Veritasium, 13 million subscribers, has turned science into an interesting thing. That's where I think it keeps going, is how effective are you at making somebody that has no idea who you are or may not have any interest in your subject matter care. I think that that's where it continues to go, is just building and becoming, because it is still a new medium, in terms of telling stories through these platforms. And I think that it's just going to get more nuanced in the same way that film did. Film started, with no sound, and then it went to music, and then it went to dialogue, and then, to color, and then to visual effects, and all these elements kept elevating the level of storytelling and what was possible. And I think that the same applies with social media.